Welcome back. You're watching Business Morning on Channels Television. Now we'll turn our focus to the commodities market now. And of course, we're focusing on grains production and storage as we're coming in very hot into the festive year. And now Nigeria has planned to increase its strategic grain reserves to, among other things, boost food security and avert further export of these grains outside the country. Now, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, it recommends that every country should have reserves of about 20 kilograms per person for 3 months at any point in time. Now, from 2010 to 2014, the federal government has added total storage facilities of 1.2 million metric tons capacity grain reserves to its strategic reserves across the 36 states of the Federation. So it kind of also answers the many questions about if a possible imminent famine is actually coming for 2017. But we're hoping that Ada will help us put this into more perspective. She's an economic research analyst with Financial Derivatives Company. Good morning to you, Ada. Thank you for coming in.
Good morning, Harriet.
So, grains reserve. We've had this conversation. We had it immediately.
Yeah.
You know, we saw that blazing headlines about an imminent famine in 2017. But now with this piece of information, what do you think? What do you make of the planned increase in grain storage?
It's definitely a welcome story. You see that if you look at the past GDP reports, we see that the agriculture sector is growing at a steady pace, so that's very good. And that is imminent in rice production as well. So if you see Ebonyi State, they recently banned the importation of foreign rice. This is to encourage more of Abakaliki rice in the region, and that has been doing very well. A bag of rice sells for 8,000 naira to 15,000 naira. So, and again, there's been some sort of a joint business between Lagos State and Kebbi for the production of lake rice now, as we hear, and that is going to come on board in December 15th, and that is going to sell for 15,000 naira. So it seems like the government is actually taking very, very proactive steps and measures in terms of making sure that we're grain and food sufficient, and be able as well to export to a neighboring country. So it's very good.
But then, taking a look at the list, you've sent in for commodities, talking about the most common ones. We're talking about rice, beans, sugar, maize. Now, if Nigeria has higher grain reserves, don't you think at this time there's need to, should the country draw down at this year end to moderate retail prices? Because for Lagos, you're buying a bag of rice at 24,000 naira, and in Kano and Onitsha, you have that at 22,400 and 25,200 naira respectively.
So that one, for that price, the higher prices are rice that are imported, so stallion and cap rice, so they have some sort of import content in them. But the ones that are produced locally are somewhat cheaper. But then we have to encourage ourselves to consume more of our locally produced rice, because they're very good.
But is there enough to actually satisfy the consumers?
No, there isn't. It is a gradual process. It is a huge investment, and it's expanding. And there's been some sort of good news, and investors are interested in this development. So it is a long-term strategy. But so far so good. What will happen is we're going to see a reduced pressure on price of rice that have import content, because if the locally produced rice will compete with the foreign rice, and in a very long term, we will stop consuming imported rice and focus on locally produced rice. So it is good.
But taking a look at the federal government's moves, definitely it means that they've got some of these grains already stored. How do you think the Federal Ministry of Agriculture should go about now in terms of distributing to those to states where you can't easily afford this 25,000 naira, particularly for those who are yet to be paid their salaries as civil servants, that is?
So our population is, we're about 180 million people in Nigeria. So for our grain reserves, it is still, I don't think it's huge enough compared to other countries, but it's something, I don't think we've actually focused on this, but now we're focusing on increasing our production and as well storing, increasing our grain reserves. So I don't see, it isn't a significant, we won't see a significant effect yet, but in the very long term we'll see that, and that will even out to all consumers.
No, one of the things that always makes people cajole people to want to do things is if they are incentivized.
Yes.
So do you think there are enough incentives for farmers and those in the value chain business in grain production?
There are incentives, actually. There's been a lot of agricultural projects and agricultural benefits to small-scale and medium-scale farmers. So you can access loans at a reasonable rates, and as well giving out some sort of funds to encourage farmers. So that is very good, and that is why, like I said earlier, we're seeing increased rice production in Ebonyi State, Anambra as well as a state as well coming up with increased rice production, Lagos and Kebbi and most other states. So if every state come together to, if we see success stories in other states, we'll all come together and we'll make this a success as well.
So outside the shores of Nigeria, experts say increased production outlook in Brazil, Australia and US may weigh down on grain prices. What's your take on this?
Well, in the global market, grain prices are still relatively low because of, we say this all the time, huge inventories and increased production from major producers like Brazil, Australia, the US and the Black Sea region. So I mean, that hasn't been a problem. There's been some sort of favorable weather conditions as well. So there's a lot of competition, because if the US strengthens, there's going to be a reduced demand for grains that are produced in the US, and consumers switch to alternatives, grains produced in Ukraine and other countries with relatively decent rates. So in the global market, grain prices are good because we have increased production, high inventory. So that's going to be the news for now.
All right, thank you so much, Ada, for coming on the program, of course, and flashing up those numbers for us. Ada Akonobi is an economic research analyst with Financial Derivatives Company. So we're still talking about commodities, but turning our attention to the energy side of things, oil and gas now. Let's quickly remind you where the markets will be starting off today. The markets reopen after Eid al-Maulud. So on Friday, the top 7 that we track for you on the program, this is how they shaped up. Corn oil was unchanged at 34 naira 11 kobo. Forte oil was the top gainer on that particular list with 10.23% appreciation to close at 106 naira 23 kobo. Mobil was down 0.70%, I beg your pardon, closing at 305 naira. MRS is unchanged. Owando was down 2.35. Seplat also off 0.85%. If you aggregate these numbers, of course, along with the other oil and gas stocks, retail stocks on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, you'll find that at the end of the week, that index came in positive 7.74%. Year to date is at 33.0%, also positive, and we have dividend yield at 2.0%.